Many times we brought up the story of the Naruto VCDs that went around all the friendship group. This is the man himself who ruined our lives.
Yeah, I'd like to just say a firm you. I could have been a contender.
You could be normal, yeah.
Now look at me. Here we are.
Well, hello, and welcome back to Gateway to Anime. How are you all? What's going on, Charlie? We are in a new place. We are in Melbourne. We came down here for Crunchyroll Expo. It's very exciting, and this is my very good friend, Lauchlan McAllister. Now, Lachlan's been mentioned on this podcast quite a few times.
Wait, what?
Actually, yes.
Yeah, seriously, you're often referenced.
As a good, moral standing principle with a good reputation and review. Oh, no, wait. You hate all my opinions. So, yeah, this is
it's true. This is going to be fun. But many times we brought up the story of the VCDs, the Naruto VCDs that went around all the friendship group. This is the man himself who ruined our lives.
Yeah, I'd like to just say a firm fuck you. I could have been a contender.
You could be normal, yeah. I was going to be a star as a beauty pageant.
It's fine. Now look at me. Here we are.
Oh, God. I spent so much money. I used to work at Red Rooster to earn money to pay the kid who ran his family owned a internet cafe. Oh. And he had really good internet for Perth back in then. I don't know what they had. So he was able to download the episodes, and he also downloaded other stuff for me. But I paid him way too much money because, once I was addicted, it was just like, you want the next episode? I'm like, yeah, come on. Give me what do you got? $50? Yeah, give me. For one really badly fucking copied down video. Yeah, go for it.
That's called business.
Honestly. I learned the hard way.
Yeah, so we are here at Lockie's wonderful bar, GG Easy on Queen Street in Melbourne. If you're ever in Melbourne, come on down. This is Australia's first official esports bar. I was here on Saturday night. Don't remember much, but it was a good old time.
He was just going around telling two people anime. No, not
Gamers and anime? Yeah. Enemies?
No. Friends?
No, in fact, as we'll get on to, friends.
Definitely. Well, this is what we wanted to talk about because it's something that, and in fact, you even mentioned the other day, it's interesting. We actually became friends over Final Fantasy 7.
Yeah,
that's how we became friends.
From you, wasn't
yeah.
Still trying. Never got the game. Never played it.
My parents, when we were younger, my parents got an Atari 6800. Wow. Was it? Coleco? No, Atari something or other. My friends all had was it Nintendos? No, Super Nintendos. And growing up, we didn't have a heap of money, not poor or anything, but anyway, it wasn't a priority. And I remember one day my parents was always jealous because I'd go to my friends' houses and play Super Nintendo and Sega and just be like, oh, this is the best thing ever. And then I would go home and talk about it to my parents. Then one day I got home, they're like, oh, we've got a surprise for you. It's set up in front of the TV. And I was like, oh my God. And I remember just getting there and being like, oh, yeah, asteroids.
Lee Carmelo's putting challenge?
Not even, no. That had colour.
You have selected.
We're talking asteroids and Pong and, oh God, yeah, it was fun. But yeah, so I was desperate. Yeah.
That's how we became friends.
And that's why you now own a gaming bar, it was it's your villain origin story.
I think that sort of early denial probably also made me, when I got into it, I probably went a lot deep. I got really obsessed with it because, you're just jealous because it's really funny. A lot of my early friends were actually who had those systems. I think they weren't as into it because they were just like, oh yeah, whatever. But I think that sort of starvation made me really desperate for them.
There's obviously a huge connection between JRPGs and anime, obviously, both from Japan. Funny that. But it's just, they're hugely connected. They're so interconnected. And I'm just going to run through a bit of a history because really we were into JRPGs before we got into anime. It was
did we call them JRPGs straight away, or do we just think of them as RPGs?
We just called them RPGs, I think.
I think that's interesting. Yeah.
That's the same as with anime though, because we were watching anime, we went, where was anime when we were
Pokemon.
watching?
And then you're starting watching cartoons from America, and you're like, what do we call
different
this?
Yeah,
the nomenclature is interesting.
That weird Western anime. It's is that a double negative? That weird sort of would it just be? Yeah, actually, that's really interesting.
Well, it is an interesting point, but it's also there's a lot of contention about what constitutes a JRPG. I mean, the very standard definition is that it's an RPG game made in Japan, but there's another school of thought which basically says, well, it's actually a style now as opposed to just RPGs made in Japan. Because you look at something like Elden Ring or Dark Souls, RPGs made in Japan, but they are not JRPGs. It's quite interesting. I'll get into it a little bit. So I'm not going to.
It's definitely a bit of a stickler thing, but it's fair, right?
It is a stickler thing. I was on Reddit last night. And it was on the JRPG subreddit, which is a really wholesome place actually for Reddit.
A Reddit?
Wait, is it wholesome?
Surprisingly so, except for this one. I was on this one and it was like, give me your hot takes. Give me your JRPG hot takes. And I was like, sort by controversial.
Yeah,
I was like,
of course.
right on.
It's the only way to sort.
No, did you actually?
Of course I did.
That's all I ever do on Reddit.
Give it to me.
Give me controversy.
You got to do it.
Oh, no.
But no, one of the big things was people getting into a huge argument about this exact thing about, no, that's not what a JRPG is. And no, yes, it is. Keep it simple, stupid. Other people have been like, no, it's all about. But again, there's so many different things that constitute a JRPG, but you know them when you see them. So let me explain a little bit about the history of JRPGs in Japan. And then we'll talk about the massive crossovers that exist in anime, of which there are an awful lot. Now, we could literally do an entire podcast called Gateway to JRPGs. It's something I'm even slightly considering as a spin-off.
Is this a backdoor pilot that you're pitching right
finally
now?
got it in here.
Yeah.
But
We're too successful. You're too successful. You're listening too well, you know. Got to do a spin-off.
I've got to do a spin-off.
Spin-off series,
No, but
something.
look, I'm going to try and I'll keep this brief because I mean, literally, the history of this world is massive, as big as anime. I mean, not quite, but it's huge. So, Japan obviously has a rich history of gaming, and mostly console gaming reigns supreme in that country, and that has been since the start of the 1980s, with the phenomenal success of the NES, which
I
of
would
course
also
went
just
worldwide.
say arcade gaming's big as well.
Arcade gaming as well, absolutely, yes. However, the country produced thousands of PC games from the 70s to the 90s. Now, the computer industry was extremely fragmented at first, but two major platforms became dominant. That is the NEC PC 8801 and the PC 9801. And a major difference between the Japanese systems and the Western systems at the time, this is the 1980s, was the display rate resolutions. So that was 640 times 400 in Japan, which was to actually accommodate the more elaborate Japanese text, which was, of course, flashed up.
Yeah.
Which in turn influenced game design. So this is a major part of why JRPGs have such a stylistic differentiation point. So Japanese computers also had the Yamaha FM synthesis soundboards, and that was from the early 80s, which enabled unique and interesting sounds and tracks to be created by composers such as Yuzo Koshiro, who pioneered the chiptune 8-bit music and worked on such games as Dragon Slayer, which is on the Nihon Falcom, very prominent system in JRPG world, the YS series, he still does a lot of them, and the Revenge of the Shinobi, and what I played on the Sega Mega Drive, Streets of Rage. He made that soundtrack, and it's banging.
So he did the YS stuff. Still does?
I think he does. I think he still does it, yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. He actually trained with Joe Hisashi of Studio Ghibli. They trained together at the same music institution. We've already got a crossover. We've already got one.
Justifying it. Yeah, nice.
There's going to be plenty more. Don't worry about that. This is contested a little bit, but Japan's first RPG was Koei's Underground Exploration, released in 1982, followed by many others often referred to as the proto-RPGs. Early Japanese role-playing games were heavily influenced by visual novel adventure games. I've spoken about these a lot on the podcast, not to be confused with light novels, or they are different. They are basically video games, purely text-based, which give you choices. One of the most famous of which, of course, is the Fate series. Basically, they were massive influences, which is why story elements are so massive in JRPGs, especially at the time compared to Western ones. They were developed by companies such as Enix, Square, Koei, and Nihon Falcom before they went into developing JRPGs. They're all visual novels. So Nihon Falcom's Dragon Slayer, released in 1984, makes a major turning point and helps lay many of the foundations that will go on to define the genre. This was a real-time hack-and-slash dungeon crawler and is considered the first action role-playing game, which went on to huge success in Japan. And the sequel, Dragon Slayer 2, Xanadu, became the best-selling PC game in Japan and further revolutionized the genre, including character stats and large overarching quest with an action-based combat, including both melee combat, magic projectile attacks, while incorporating a side-scrolling platform game, a view during exploration, and an overhead view during battle. First RPG on a console was Dragon Stomper on the Atari 2600 in 1982. But in 1985, Yuji Horii and his team at Chungsoft began work on what would become Dragon Quest, which was released in 1986 by Enix, which became the template for all other RPG console games thereafter. It is the progenitor of what is now modern JRPGs.
That's why they haven't changed the series at all.
That's why the game's all the same. They're coming for us now. It's already happened. This one, they're always going to come for us.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine.
I'm so lost already. So,
I work in a gaming bar. Everyone tells me their opinions. It's fine.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you'd hear a couple.
Yeah. A few.
Horii's intention was to create a game with wider appeal than any before it. This led to a more streamlined approach to game design that didn't require extensive D&D experience. D&D was a huge influence on all RPGs, West and East, and hundreds of hours of rote fighting, which had more mass appeal to all gamers. He got rid of all that. The game was faster paced, based on exploration and combat, featuring a top-down view of dungeons rather than a first-person view that was more prominent at the time.
Because I know there was issues with litigation stuff.
I believe
Dungeon
so.
Dragon. Because I know the Beholder stuff. There was in Final Fantasy games, there was issues with the eye creatures. They had to rename them. Was that why they went away from D&D elements? Do you know? Or
I think
that's very specific. I know.
That's a good question. I don't know. I
know there was some issues.
Definitely. And I think a lot of it was just the fact that D&D, especially back then, was, edition 2? Very slow. And so, and a lot of the games reflected that are very fucking slow and super grindy, whereas Dragon Quest was just like, bam, 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 let's sharpen this up, baby. So yeah, it was focused more on story and emotion as well. It was a coming-of-age tale, one of the first times. So it also featured elements still found in console RPGs today, like major quests interwoven with minor subquests, an incremental spell system, a damsel in distress storyline, and a romance element, which are now considered tropes of the genre, but these were the first to do it. So obviously there was anime art style made by Akira Toriyama. He did the character design, famously still does for Dragon Quest, and he is, of course, Dragon Ball Z's mangaka. And there was a classical score by Koichi Sugiyama, and this was the game that basically started everything. Dragon Slayer was a huge influence on Dragon Quest and also Final Fantasy. So Dragon Slayer on the PC was one of the first that changed everything, but then Dragon Quest is really the guy. But of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Final Fantasy, because Final Fantasy originally released on the NES by Square in 1987, good year, featuring a character creation system that enabled the player to build their own parties and assign different classes to the characters, who in turn evolved through a class change system throughout the game. One of your favorite things, Lockie. It also featured a time travel element to the story, as well as side view battles with players on the right side of the screen and enemies on the left, ordered in turns. Turn-based fighting game, which became another staple of the genre. It wasn't the first turn-based battle system, it was one of the first to make it famous. While creating Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi took inspiration from Hayao Miyazaki's films, most prominently Laputa Castle in the Sky, which influenced the airships, which feature heavily across many of the Final Fantasy games, which Miyazaki's obsessed with airships.
There's always one airship and there's always Sid.
Yep, always a Sid.
Good.
It's very good. So FF2 is mostly considered the first true Final Fantasy game, introducing an emotionally sweeping storyline with morally ambiguous characters, tragic events. It changed with experience points actually being based on progressive story parts as opposed to just grinding. So the more you use a skill, the better it becomes. FS2 also featured open-ended exploration and the now generic theme of an evil empire versus a small band of struggling friends. Basically Star Wars. And the iconic chocobo creature was inspired by Miyazaki's Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Great film.
Great film. But that was what chocobo came from. Look, that is a very, very basic welcome to JRPGs. Now, something special. I mean, what was the first one you ever played, Lucky? What was your first?
I think it was definitely coming to your house and watching Final Fantasy VII, I think. Because I didn't have Super Nintendo. And I think one or two friends may have had Chrono Trigger, but this back then we were, Alex the Kid, I think, the default
Alex
games you got, Sonic, that kind of stuff, Mario. And there wasn't too much beyond that. I think you were the first kid I met who had sort of weird games.
Shining Force, don't forget.
Shining Force was my very first.
Oh, was that your first? Yeah, I played that from you, but not until I'd played Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII became my obsession from watching you play, and then convinced my family to get a PlayStation, I think. And then I think I remember I bought it and played it for ages. And a few days in, realized I needed a memory card. Yeah. And it was stupid because it was probably at the time, right? It was completely fine, right? But I remember panicking because my PlayStation had been on the whole time and I didn't know that wasn't a thing. And I can't remember, it was like called someone and was like, I think you explained it, or one of the boys. And then I was just panicking thinking, oh God, it's going to explode. So I convinced my parents to go to Inaloo Shopping Centre. I remember it like clearly just being like, oh God, I hope I get home before it explodes. I'm so far into the game.
And you are the grinder of all grinders. Of all of us, Lockie's the one who 100%. No, that's not true. Lockie will do every single thing in the game
then not finish
until he gets to the final boss and just walks away.
I'm the same.
Oh, it's so bad.
I don't know, dude. I literally, because I think I love to zone out and just fight in, so I don't know, if anyone who hasn't played a Final Fantasy game or a JRPG, a lot of them have turn-based combat, which is often random encounters, similar to Pokemon, which is obviously another JRPG.
Famous
that
JRPG.
Is maybe arguably the most famous RPG.
That's up there, yeah.
Has to be.
Yeah. Maybe.
I mean, it's not, in terms of worldwide fame, I'm not like it's the greatest, although it's pretty fucking lit, to be honest. But the random encounter kind of thing and just the turn-based and just grinding and leveling up, I always find that I never understand how to how to use any of the system, but I will be so overpowered because I've just like ground.
You've had a nice day and then you just don't realize.
Just brute force. That's it.
There's that anime that she's a witch and she wants a quiet life.
Oh,
she kills like 5 slimes a day, but every day for like 100 years, and then she becomes like the most powerful character. Doesn't even realize.
Yeah.
It's cheesy but fun. Yeah,
but we love it.
So that's you.
That's me. Literally, just like so. But then just accidentally. It's like we talked about this many times. Just having like one Pokemon that you power up, and then every year you have like a level 3 Magikarp, and you have like a level fucking 99.
You Gengar.
Well,
his only Pokemon he ever.
Now I have told this story on the podcast before, but you are here, so I guess we'll have to do
But
it
it obviously means I remember it. So yeah.
I was hysterical because I had just OP'd this motherfucking Gengar, and I was the first person at school to realize that you could just like kind of not cheap, but you could buy the carbs, from Cerulean City, I think, and you could just max out his speed. So I just maxed out his speed, and I just Hypnosis Dream Eater every time, and I would just tear through everyone at school. No one could touch me. I was just like golden, the king of the Subiaco Primary School top oval. Probably. That's how I remember it.
Probably how you remember a lot of things, though.
And then lucky, it was like this battle was coming a long time coming because we're both the big gamers at school.
Yeah. The rivals. Who was Sasuke? Who was Naruto? Who is who?
But I was like, I'm lucky enough. The battle that was foretold was coming. Everyone gathered at the top oval. We linked up the Game Boys, and I was like, "You motherfucker! I'm going to one-shot you every time with this Gengar." And you had a fucking Dragonite.
But didn't I also, was it Poker Flute or something I used to keep waking them up? I can't remember what it was.
I missed.
Could you use, was it just a miss?
I missed.
Probably.
Because I went at the Dragon. Sometimes I miss that happened, but then it didn't matter because Hypnosis would then get them, and Dream Eater gives you life back. So it didn't matter. So I was just like,
something one-shot you, didn't it?
Fucking Dragonite one-shot my Gengar. The rest of my Pokemon were
I remember
hot garbage.
The next time, it was like a level 35 Pokemon or something. I'm like, wait, what's happening?
I didn't need him. Gengar did it all for me. Fuck.
And we learned a valuable lesson that day. Don't know what, but we also didn't, because that's exactly how you should play Pokemon. Have one OP character and then you're fucked.
I mean, I think the lesson here that he lost. So
So you're the king of Subiaco Primary.
I don't think I think like Sam. But I was definitely happy to beat him. But
it was a good day.
Probably. It's probably like he probably was going to make a crown or something like the school we had.
I was close.
The Pokemon Master.
Yeah. Pokemon Master just like rolling. It's terrible. I'm still not over it. But
I don't know why we didn't have girlfriends or what.
It's a while. Yeah, it's bizarre. The best thing now is that there is a huge push for remasters of JRPGs. They are starting to come out left, right, and center, one of which is what I'll talk about in a bit. Probably my favorite JRPG of all time, a series, extraordinary stuff. But you can play all of these games quite easily now. Some of the rarer ones are very difficult to find and like go for stupid amounts of money on eBay and stuff. Like I think Suikoden, which I will talk about in a second, goes up for about, it's like $400.
You mean Suikoden?
Suikoden.
We've already talked about this on the podcast. Mispronunciation of Suikoden.
I know, I can't. I've been
Suikoden.
I doubt anime and gaming fans would care about pronunciation.
They don't care.
Yes, go take a look at our TikTok. They're all fine with my pronunciation.
Sam's favorite anime.
My favorite anime of all time, yeah.
Escaflowne?
Escaflowne, he said.
Oh, okay, Escaflowne.
Look, I was breezing through one of my opening sections here, It
is funny how often when you think you say something right and you look back at it and you're just like, and you listen again and you're like, what the hell was I saying?
The hell was that word? How did that come out?
This is when you merge too. That's
man,
great.
it was anyway, I'm still paying for that on TikTok. But I mean, Lockie, what was it about JRPGs you think that hooked you in then and still now?
I really liked the sort of growth and progression of characters. I think that was something I always struggled with a lot of earlier, those sort of puzzle games and jumping, like platformers and stuff like that. I lost interest. Not saying one's better or worse, right? Because I think it's just what makes your brain happy, right?
Yeah.
Like for me, the whole like choosing, especially when I can control them in some ways, like if it's just straight leveling gets you stats, it doesn't interest me anywhere near as much. But as soon as you give me any kind of control about where my characters go, even if, and I particularly like a game which lets me just make a character useless. Do you know, is it Pathfinder?
Pathfinder, as in the D&D.
Yeah, sorry, Pathfinder, the game though. Kingmaker. Anyway, there's like an actual video game they made through using the Pathfinder mechanics instead of the D&D.
Oh.
And I've never been more confused by a video game where I'm just like, oh my God, and I made a character and I got like level 30. I'm like, wow, this character's useless. And I looked up online, I'm like, how do I fix it? Like, oh no, your character's useless.
It's over.
Oh wow. And I kind of really enjoyed that, where it's like, I had all this control to completely like make a terrible character. Obviously, I wouldn't want to, but I think FF10 I don't like as much, whereas sometimes it feels like you're just connecting that big circle. But yeah, anywhere where I can, like, as you said before, one of my favorite things is like choosing a class, like Vandal Hearts. Oh,
what a game, man. Underrated.
Vandal Hearts.
Yeah, dude.
Strategy
Vandal
RPG.
Hearts.
You
strategy
just
RPG.
unlocked a memory.
Looking into the distance.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Vandal Hearts was
Banger.
dope, man. And the Vandal Hearts 2 was a bit weirder, but still great story. But
I just
strange
didn't like
mechanic.
moving at the same time.
Moving at the same time. Yeah. So tell people the difference between a strategy RPG and a straight RPG.
Is a strategy RPG could be an RPG. Oh, that is an interesting one, isn't it? Right? Because like I would say most people would probably play Vandal Hearts and think of it as a strategy RPG and a JRPG, but then you've got like XCOM, which is a strategy RPG, I guess.
Yep.
But you're like, no one would call that a JRPG.
No.
So is it just like
It's made
the
in
anime
Japan.
sort of style? Like where do you sort of call it? Because like visually it looks like all of those other ones, right? Because JRPG in my mind is much more a stylistic thing in terms of much closer to like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy and that kind of stuff.
Where does Zelda fit?
Zelda.
Action RPG. Well,
It's an action
Yeah,
RPG,
because
but
it's-
is it
but it is-
JRPG?
it's-
I mean,
it is-
yeah.
think so. No,
Well, it
I would
is-
say no.
It is Japanese, though, right?
It is Japanese, yeah, absolutely.
But that's what's interesting because it's like it is. Yeah, in my head, there's JRPGs fit a very specific mold.
I think also everyone's going to have their own opinion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's not going to be a perfect answer, I think. But I mean, that doesn't mean we're not going to argue about it.
Absolutely. I will die on this hill.
I would
never thought about
this thing I didn't think about.
I don't care about until right now.
But I mean, Shining Force, strategy RPG.
Yeah, but such a JRPG, right?
But it's strategy RPG. I mean, there's definitely crossovers there. Like, because strategy, the difference between a strategy game is you have a whole army on field and you move them all accordingly. There's generally you have like 10 plus characters on a board.
And whether you end up fighting the evil church.
Always in the picture. Without a fucking
I wonder
shadow
if
of a doubt.
like Christianity has just got a real bad rep in Japan.
Probably. I mean, fair enough. too.
Potentially.
Maybe.
But I mean, one of your favorite games of all time is Final Fantasy Tactics, right?
Yes. You know, you always have a few, right? So I'm not very good at saying which is my favorite, but it's always top 5.
And they're actually about to do a remaster. There's a remaster coming left, right, and center of Tactics Ogre.
Oh, Cling Together. Yeah, because they did the
That's
Cling Together
better.
version for
PSP.
Yeah, that's right. So it's doing that again or
yeah,
different
I
again?
think so, but they're doing a new one for Switch.
Oh,
And-
so
and
not just
Steam.
porting it.
No.
Oh, that's exciting.
New remaster. Yeah. So yeah, there's just so many. I mean, obviously Castlevania, which of course we all know about now because of Adi Shankar's wonderful adaptation of it. But that was a very famous JRPG.
Is that a JRPG? Castlevania? Surely not.
It's a side scroller.
It's a side-scrolling platformer. It has story, so more than like I think a lot
It's
of
just
those. But I would
nebulous,
say
yeah.
it's still platformer.
Yeah, it's a side scroller.
Go side scrolling.
Platformer.
Actually, yeah.
The only thing is it does have some elements because I think you get like weapons and upgrades sort
Yeah,
of
yeah,
temporarily
it's
and
a-
stuff. But I think it's still a platformer. Same with like Mario, you can get bigger and fire thing. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I'd say JRPG.
Okay.
This is going to turn into, is it a JRPG or not? My favorite game we
I'm
play.
going to be confident saying that's not.
All right.
I mean, that's just my opinion.
Confidence. That's what we really,
That's what we're here for.
that's what we're here for.
Was that
If you need
last
me to
one?
say anything controversial, I'll just say because I'm not on again. So I don't care what it is.
Was that last one historical fiction or not?
Oh my
JRPG
God.
or not?
JRPG or not? I feel like Final Fantasy is obviously, when I think of JRPGs, is probably now the series where you think of first.
Yeah,
like that is
Like the most quintessential.
And
If
And
someone
Dragon
was
Quest.
asked to name a JRPG, they'd name Final
Yeah.
Fantasy.
Yeah.
and out of all the Final Fantasies, so other than Tactics, is 7 your favorite?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or
Ooh.
Disc 1 of Final Fantasy VIII. Disc 1 of Final Fantasy VIII is a masterpiece.
I'm all about a flying university. Like that sounds sick.
I love that shit. And then
Yeah.
it just, after Disc 1, it just got worse. Like each disc is worse. And by the end, it's like, why are we fighting the ultimate? And then that, that all the shitty trope stuff where it's like they all, just 3? And just 2 where they all find out they're all orphans and they all knew each other and somehow have all forgotten.
We love it. We love it.
I would argue all Final Fantasies get fucking batshit crazy towards the end.
yeah,
Like, even
I mean-
7 gets a little bit wild. Like,
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
I'd
you're like,
say
hang
the
on,
weird-
I'm not me.
The grounded one is
me?
weirdly 12. And that was the point of 12, right? 12, they wanted it to be less of a
yeah.
3, a band of misfits end up fighting God or some evil ultimate being where it's like kingdom versus
Yes.
they
Yes.
thought it would, I think it was going to make the characters more human and personal where it felt like a more sort of small but real story.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of 12. Again, that was the first time they strayed out of turn-based.
Yes, I believe
into action.
it was because it was after 11, which was the first version of them doing an MMO.
That's right.
So I think it was that one that was sort of trying to combine a bit of both worlds because it was one you controlled one character and the other sort of moved around, but you
Yeah,
were
you can give
live.
orders, but
And then it was also a lot more grindy. Like it took a long time to do certain things, and there was like random way. I think it was a spear that I tried to get, and it was just there's a lot of odd chance whether you open a chest. It was like 50% chance of whether you get like this amazing weapon or something useless. Yeah, it was a very strange game, but I loved 12. But I can, when you play a game, you're like, I think most people would hate this. Like,
I just can't do. I'm just so bad at video games except for turn-based. So if it's not turn-based combat, I actually can't play it.
But is that because you don't play it, get annoyed, and then just don't get better at it?
Yeah, I wasn't a genius immediately. So I'm off it. I'm done.
Well, turn-based, you get to like sit there and think.
Absolutely.
Right?
I'm just like, if I do, I can like look out the window for a bit, come back and be like, oh shit, yeah.
No, I respect that, especially, playing, esports bar, like I am, everyone assumes I must be good at games, but I'm just like, no, we're good. I'm pretty bad, especially anything fast-paced. Yeah, no, my hands don't keep up.
First-person
Street Fighter
shooters.
6 at Crunchyroll Expo.
Yeah, but you're terrible.
That's
you
true.
No
Yes,
idea
I
what
am
you're doing.
terrible.
That's a low bar.
Low kick to victory on any fighting game. And I actually got pretty far at a Tekken tournament doing that once. Everyone was like, stop it. No. And I was just like,
You're a monster.
It's a really interesting thing where we have all these customers who'll come in and like if we have like a fighting game tournament and they're like, I've never lost to any of my friends. I'm going to be amazing. You're like, oh yeah, you should come in. And they're like, I will. And come in and just go 0-2 straight away. And they're just like, what happened? It's like you've lived in this little bubble where your friends were like kind of shitting you with the best of your friends. And they come in and like, this player's actually goes to tournaments around the world. And now you've just got your ass kicked. The famous sort of thing in fighting games where people talk about it's like too good to play with your friends, not good enough to go into tournaments.
Gotcha.
Where it's like that's a lot of the disconnect with fighting games where it's like, where do you go? Like,
Yeah.
it's better these days because online's a lot better.
Yes.
Getting there, the rollback and stuff. But it's an interesting one to say, like, it's so detailed on hardware, there's that disconnect.
Yeah, my friends are mostly there with Super Smash Brothers. Like they're all too good to like fight me. That's fair. Like I play Princess Peach for no apparent reason. I'm
Try
just
and
like
float around.
Well, honestly, because every time, this is going so off topic, every time I do any kind of Smash character, I just run off the ledge. Like I remember I was
No, that's
like,
literally the opposite of what you're supposed to do.
Like, God damn it. So I was like, well, I suck. So Peach is good because I got my umbrella. And I
So
can
you
float.
slowly fall off the edge. I don't think that's the...
It's working.
Yeah, actually, maybe you stick to turn-based. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I thought I was a genius. I was like, if I can float slowly.
These fools, when they jump off the ledge, they'll fall quicker. Yeah, there's nothing worse than when you're one of those, if you play a character who's not very good at getting back on the ledge and you get knocked off and you're someone edge guarding, you're just like, I died, and you've just got no mobility. You're like, I hate that guy.
We'd be remiss to talk about JRPGs and not mention one of the biggest game changers that happened in the JRPG world. And it was born of a super group of creators. And it was on the Super Nintendo. And there's actually an extraordinary phone port for it right now. You can download from, I believe, Google Play or the App Store. And that game is, of course, Chrono Trigger. Now, Chrono Trigger was made by the writer of Dragon Quest, Yuji Horii, who we mentioned before. The director was Yoshinori Kitase, who made Final Fantasy 6, 7, 8, and 10, who's the director. The composer was the legendary Nobuo Uematsu from Final Fantasy, of course, and actually was the mentor of Kevin Penkin, who we got on, who does a lot of anime and video games himself, and extraordinary. I mean, I think for me, FF7 is the finest orchestral score in all gaming.
Yeah.
I think it's just extraordinary.
Yeah.
Eris theme is like one of the most hauntingly
How dare
beautiful.
you bring that up?
I hear the
I'm
thing,
not
and
over
I just see the materia dropping down the thing, and I just like, I'm crying again.
I watched that video today because we've actually been playing the Final Fantasy VII remake at Lucky's house while I've been down here in Melbourne, and it's been a lot of fun. But it is different, but I'm loving it. But it's a weird. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Just quickly, my gamer tag was always Red's theme.
It was, yeah.
Which is just because I didn't know it was called Cosmic. The song was called
Cosmic
Cosmic
Canyon.
Canyon.
Yeah.
So I literally was just obsessed with Red's theme when you went into thing, and I was just like, I love it. And I just called myself Red's theme.
I hate that theme because I had a scratched version of Final Fantasy VII, and the bit where you're in the canyon and it goes up to the stars, it froze there and played it on repeat. And I remember I was so
This feels like a rigged scenario where it's like, my favorite thing, and you're like, that's my nightmare. Sam's just like this podcast needs more drama. And he's like, I'm so sorry to trigger you.
How dare you?
No, it's
It was so often. I was just like, we just got his backstory. We had like the camera panned up and it was beautiful. They're looking at the stars. Do you remember that bit?
And the statue.
Yes.
Oh my
except that I was like, beautiful bit ruined.
Nanakai? Is that his real name?
Yes. No, and it was when he realized his dad didn't actually betray them. He thought his dad betrayed them and ran away. That's right. And then, shame. Spoilers. But he found out his dad actually faced like the main part of the army and they couldn't kill him. So they petrified him with like spears from a distance.
Right.
So he turned to stone. And then they were but they were still so scared or he did so much damage they retreated.
They ran, yeah.
And the thing is he's on the statue on the cliff with the spears. But obviously, the crying is like a single.
Yeah, I
tone.
remember it too well.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Because I had to restart the game because
I love
it
that
would not.
poignant piece is now just something you hate.
Oh, I was done with it.
Have we ruined the podcast yet? Have we?
Probably. I quit. I have to listen to Red's theme one more
time.
Something you should admit. No.
I think the best thing about Final Fantasy VII to me, I think about the Final Fantasy games in general, is obviously we talked about the Motley Crew, that kind of like, you know, the band of misfits together. The characters are always so good. They've always got great design. And I think that we've always just kind of had just a little, like it's always just been kind of fun to see the different spins that each number does. Like they're all different enough, but with the same wink to each other.
I much prefer that they change it. I mean, it's still obviously very much its own thing, but I much prefer that they change it up than do sort of Dragon Quest-y thing where it's sort of, you feel a lot like you're playing and I've enjoyed Dragon Quest games, but I like it when they sort of take risks and stuff like that. Yeah. Like 9 I loved, 10 I loved, and 8, even though they're just wildly different, you know, like 9 them deciding to go back to more traditional fantasy after getting sort of more techie with 7 and 8 and sort of even like 12 being, as you said, sort of more grounded story. I liked all those sort of choices. I would always rather they take risks. You know?
Yeah, and I think that it's funny because about the ones that we're going to kind of talk about, JRPG, what like Dragon Quest, everything you were saying is like very much that old school fantasy, like wizard, mage.
Very D&D inspired.
Very D&D inspired. But I feel like Final Fantasy VII is obviously more like cyberpunk-y, kind of that sort of steampunk, my favorite aesthetic.
Favorite?
That kind of thing where you kind of go sci-fi elements.
Yeah.
And they're all so different.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy X is completely different again. You kind of go back in time to like a kind of a more like there's like they're on an island that is very much like it's sort of different.
10 does also still have that like very RPG thing of like there was like an old civilization that was more advanced kind of thing and bit feeling.
Chrono Trigger was like, and also Akira Toriyama, again, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Quest, did the character design. It is a super team come together to make, and it's quite a short game relatively. There's a lot of time travel, a lot of jumping around, but it is like, it was it's still to this day regarded as one of the best games ever made. This and Final Fantasy VII.
You'd have to say, same with Final Fantasy VI versus 7 and Chrono Trigger, are probably the 3 most common. You would say Suikoden, but it's generally, I would say it's generally comes down to Chrono Trigger, FF6 and FF7 for most people. Yeah. And I think a lot of the time it comes down to what you played first.
These games are very accessible. You can get FF7 on phone, you can get it on Steam, same with Chrono Trigger. And it's much more accessible than it used to be. You don't need an old Super NES with a cartridge, you know. Like,
although it's very accessible within certain platforms. I think there's definitely some argument that a lot of people don't like the idea that you often don't own something. If it's online or if it's on your phone, sometimes you worry that you don't actually have like a copy where regardless of what changes around the world, like say your phone, you know, like your phone gets updated and something you might not own it anymore or the rules change. There's always that fear, I think.
I had it on the DS. I had the Chrono Trigger. Chrono Cross on the DS.
Was Chrono Cross on the DS?
I think it was Chrono Cross, actually. I don't think I had Chrono Trigger.
I underrated.
Underrated game?
Yeah, I think I only played Chrono Cross,
I
actually.
like Chrono Cross. Still not, it had a lot of flaws. And I mean, like a lot of JRPGs, pretty batshit story. But
Yeah, I just had another obscure, not JRPG, but one that was called The World Ends With You. I talked about this. I had that on DS as well.
Yeah.
And
the new one? Have you played the newest one?
No.
I've heard really good things, but I haven't actually had a chance yet. So.
There's an anime adaptation of that too.
There is.
And that's more in line with what I'm going to talk about after, which is that kind of like set in modern day Tokyo in a very different aesthetic, which is also following an anime kind of thing. Like we've got, these ones we're talking about, we've got fantasy, that old school sort of thing. And then we've kind of get more and more modern, more and more.
It is interesting how much more, even though it was already Japan, right? It is interesting how much a lot of the modern JRPGs are so much more anime in style and stuff than they were in the past. Something I actually like less, even though I like anime, but you know.
Yeah,
I mean, we'll talk about that later.
There's so much crossover, isn't there?
There's so many anime adaptations of these JRPG games as well.
Yeah.
And that is like a huge thing. And
gacha games.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Well, I mean, there's a new, the new Final Fantasy is an MMO, right? That is
The
online?
14?
The online one.
Yeah, 16. So 14 is the big one where they released it. It was a bit of a disaster. It wasn't very popular, but they redid it. And they did it. Maybe it's because Japan, they actually care about that kind of stuff. They actually came out and apologized, we're going to make it better. And now it's universally loved.
It's everywhere, isn't it?
Oh, doing so well. Yeah. They did a great job. And there's, they really seem to care about it. Like whenever they do interviews they talk about it and they love their world and stuff, which is great. And Japan do that really well where they just genuinely care about their product and stuff.
Absolutely.
The last game I played from Final Fantasy was the one where you are literally on a Bucks night and you drive in a convertible the whole way across 15? And there's a bit where, it's 15, and you basically in a boy band, what it looks like.
It was fun though.
It was so much fun. It was so good. No, it was actually like a return to form for me. I really enjoyed fishing. because it was a blokey time, you know. I was like, I'm going to fish with my mates. I'm going to go see my lady.
It's amazing
I'm
how
going to go
much
see my
fishing
bride.
is in fucking JRPGs.
All games.
It was
so much
It was
fishing.
just so funny that when there's an Riot's making an MMO now apparently, and someone on Twitter was like said something about it. It's like, and the guy lead who's not answering that many questions, he's answering stuff, but he's like, oh, that'd be fishing. Like it's like, oh, you gotta have fishing in the game.
Gotta have fishing.
In role playing
Crazy.
elements, you gotta have fishing.
So yeah, I'm going to talk about a game series which I still love to this day, and some got very exciting news very recently, actually, which I'll get to in a second. So I now know the game is pronounced Suikoden, but Lockie and I have spent close to 30 years calling it Suikoden. All of us did. We're all of our friends. We all played this game.
Because there's nowhere we were going to hear it pronounced differently.
A bunch of kids in Perth being like, yeah, I've got this thing called Suikoden, mate. Like,
How did we get our hands on that?
my cousin went around to his house. He had it. I then went to Blockbuster and
They had
hired
it.
out. Yeah, they
Yeah,
used to,
that's right.
Man, there was some
we
wild
hired
shit in
it.
Perth. Perth was like, I want to find the people who were bringing that stuff in back in the
I
day.
used to,
like-
again back like with I used to have to pay kids to get me stuff. Rez would bring me back stuff from Bali, and half the time it wouldn't work. Final Fantasy
NTCs,
9,
yeah.
bit like your Cosmic Enya thing. Whenever you get to the Black Mage's village, it would just freeze, and because it wasn't like out properly yet, or I couldn't remember what happened, and I just broke my heart.
So yeah, so what is Suikoden and why should you play it and how can you play it? Well, here we go. It's obviously a Japanese role-playing game made by Konami and created by Yoshitaka Murayama. The game series is loosely based on the classical Chinese novel The Water Margin, whose title is rendered as Suikoden, as I now know, which translates Chinese to Japanese. Each individual installment of the series centers on relative themes of war, politics, corruption, revolution, the 27 true runes, and the 108 stars of destiny. These are 108 collectible characters in each game who are loosely interpreted from the Chinese source material. So the first game was released in 95. The last one was in 2012. However, the last fully canon game, which was Suikoden 5, was released in 2006. Now in 2020, a group of ex-Konami employees formed a company called Rabbit and Bear, and they basically got the band back together, and they've coined a game which is billed as the spiritual successor to Suikoden, and it's called Eiyuden Chronicle, Eiyuden. But it comprises the core development team from 1 and 2. So they actually started a Kickstarter, which I contributed to, but it's due for release in 2023, and it's
After the sequel game that they're now releasing first.
Well, yeah, no, they've
so
done a weird spin. There's another one. There's called Eiyuden Chronicle Rising, which came out just earlier this year, which is a bit more of a side-scrolling
Did you play
platformer.
it? I never actually
I
had
didn't
much
play it. It's on
interest.
Steam right now. I didn't actually play it yet. I
I've
will.
heard okay things.
I will. I heard it was all right, but like it was always part of. I think it was one of their stretch goals, and they just.
Oh, was it?
I think
I don't
so.
think it was meant to come
Maybe
out
it wasn't.
before the
No,
game.
maybe
though.
I don't think it was.
I doubt the stretch goal was like, let's delay the thing you want.
Yeah, no,
by doing
it
another
mustn't
game
have been.
first. But
It was. I remember there's a bit of controversy around it, but it's out. You can play it right now. But everyone in the community is so excited because like this game just got Konami, interesting company, decided to make money in gambling, so they just make fucking gacha machines
and slot machines,
and
just straight slot machines.
So slot machines.
Apparently,
yeah.
there's I'm not sure if it's a slot machine or a pachinko machine, which has all of Metal Gear Solid 3, where you just sit there and you do pachinko or slots, I can't remember, and then there's just a screen that just slowly plays Metal Gear Solid 3, all the cutscenes from Metal Gear Solid.
Oh my god. That's
It
what
was
happened to
running out of
Konami.
ideas.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
They also have Metal Gear Solid, obviously. They were once one of the primary players in the video gaming industry, especially JRPGs. Like they were the guys. They made Vandal Hearts too. Like they are just they're
And also, Azure Dreams.
Azure
was
Dreams.
Konami, yeah.
Absolutely. They're amazing company, but have
We're an amazing
we're an
company,
amazing company now, very much derided in the world. But the fact that these guys all got back together to make this game, which obviously they don't have the IP for Suikoden anymore, and they're making the spiritual successor. I am so excited about this. It is a really exciting time. But a couple of days ago, at the time of recording this podcast, Konami
What are
have
the odds,
announced.
actually? Just
What are the odds?
literally a few days before we do this, because
Literally.
we've been talking about it all so long, and also like we famously have given up on anything Konami doing because it's like
Everyone gave
they
up.
make so much money just from doing gambling. Why would they
Why would
care?
you do anything else? But they are now releasing a remaster of Suikoden 1 and 2
Oh, it's sick.
on the Switch and on Steam and all of the
Xbox,
above.
PlayStation, everything.
Everything. It is finally coming out. You can play this game next year, 2023, depending on when you listen to this
Because it's
podcast.
been hard to get to like to get people to play it. It's this thing
Really
I'm
hard.
recommending is one of the best JRPGs and just an amazing game, right?
Oh,
Like
such a beautiful game. It's almost Game of Thrones-esque. Again, no god fighting. It's all politics.
Yeah.
It's all
there's a lot more
fantasy-based, but like there's magic,
grounded.
obviously.
Some betrayal in there.
A lot of
Oh,
betrayal,
yeah,
man.
like-
I'm not triggered. I say the word too often. I'm upset thinking back on some betrayal in that game.
Suikoden 2 is, to me, on par with Final Fantasy 7 as my favorite game of all time.
I will go out and say you talk about Suikoden more than 7 to you.
I think Suikoden 2 is
you
probably
play
my
it like
favorite game of all
every
time.
game.
Yeah,
You play it like once a year. You tell me you're playing it.
Yeah,
So.
I just can't help it. It's too fucking good. It's
It's
so
amazing
fucking
game.
incredible. One of the best bad guys in all gaming history.
Yep.
Luca Blight.
And the fight's
And
really
the fight
banging.
with him is actually like Suikoden's quite an easy game. Like it's not really hard, but that is
Yeah.
a fucking hard fight.
Yeah, if you're not expecting it, I remember being very surprised
Getting
because
smashed,
again, like
yeah.
we talked about, like you'll have like one party, and so like you mostly use the same characters. Like it forces you for storyline reasons to use certain characters, but you have quite a lot of flexibility, and you have a
108 of them,
party
yeah.
of 6 characters, not 3, which I really like.
Yeah,
'cause
6
I
characters.
always want to include more characters in games, but you can't with a lot of times with 3 party, and so having 6 was really fun. But yeah, then suddenly you fight this boss, and he's crazy overpowered, but you have to fight him 3 times parties of 6, and suddenly you've got your good party of characters level 30 or so, and then you've just got all these chumps. You've got
all these grunks,
Gengen
yeah.
on level 7. He's just like Kobold fighting like a beast god, like,
Yeah. So I just love that you end
go
up.
Gengen.
Get him.
I love that games you ended up with like when you can collect, and you don't have to get all 108. In fact, it's quite hard to do that. But if you get all 108, they like live in this like castle
It's a
that
base
you
building
own, like a base camp, and you can like walk around and be like, there's my blacksmith making the weapons. You like, there's a chef. Like, is there a chef?
In the second game, there is a cooking Iron Chef style mini game, and it
Yeah,
is
so
actually
sick.
one of the best. In fact, it was one of the actual stretch goals for Ayuden Chronicle was cooking mini games. Like, yep.
I have a
Just
bad habit of
immediately.
getting really drunk and trying to explain hi-yo to people and then just looking at me like I'm a nut job, especially all these young kids where I'm like, so hi-yo is this chef. And you play like Iron Chef and like you have all these recipes, but it's actually, there's assassins and everyone's like, what are you fucking talking about? But you're in your castle with your characters and everyone's like, yeah, no, this didn't happen. Then I'm talking about Samurai Pizza Cats and it all just goes wrong.
It all goes out of haywire. Kids never believe
They
it.
never believe me. Dad did too much acid and now he doesn't make sense
That's
anymore.
it. Great thing about Suikoden as well. There are 3 different battle types. You've got the normal random encounter turn-based battle where you have 6 different people, 5 plus protagonists. They can do unite abilities. You use runes, which are magic, wind, fire, all that stuff. And then you get really crazy personalized runes. 27 true runes are one of the big story mechanics. The protagonist pretty much always has one. And there are also one-on-one duels as well, where it's basically a rock, paper, scissors situation. You have attack, defend, wild attack, and the characters you fight, you hit each other at the same time.
And they go to like a 2-dimensional parallel. It looks like a sort of fighting game almost.
Yeah, it looks, and the way you figure out what your opponent's going to do is that they say something before each round of fighting, and you're like, oh, he's going to have wild attack.
I'm going to kill you. He's like, I think it's going to be a wild attack.
Defend. And then there's, of course, the war battles, which changes every time. So in Suikoden 2, it's like a proper like strategy version.
It's a strategy RPG, really, pretty much.
It just turns into a tactics game, basically. And in number 1, it's more of a rock, paper, scissors thing. It's like, it's so cool. It's so fucking cool.
And it was sort of what you were saying just before, like, brought up the chefs and all the other stuff you can do. And then you've got I think that's what's so great about those games. And I think Persona does that as well, is where you got maybe not as much mini game stuff, but you've got all these side things you can do. And that's what I love.
Yeah.
Where you're not just doing a linear story where you just visual noveling it almost, even though you've got some control. But like any of these games where there's all these sort of side spots and we're rewarded for like exploring the world. Like you find more characters and you said suddenly you get the chef, so you have a whole new world you can do and your castle gets better and then it opens new things in your castle. Like you can literally see it get like stronger and stuff.
Yep.
And again, that's sort of what I liked about Your Dreams is where you're doing all this side stuff, but it matters and it's reward. I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, even with Final Fantasy VII, there's 2 characters you didn't even have to get to complete the game, but everyone wanted to get them.
It's so obvious. I forget that you can actually not get.
You don't have to get, Yuffie or Vincent. You don't have to get either of them. But of course, you're going to get
this one,
the
Yuffie,
vampire, and you're going to get. I mean, she
do.
stole my material. I'm off it.
Yeah.
So I've never been more annoyed by that side. Like, she's annoying to get, but I do like her. She's a good character.
Vincent's obviously very cool. He's got a gun. He's a werewolf, like
I mean,
He's a vampire, right?
vampire werewolf.
he's turned into demon. His limit breaks at each level of different demons he turns into, And I think the last one's like Satan sort of wings and
That's
stuff.
right. Yeah.
Because his first one was like a behemoth, like a bit more feral. But there was even the spin-off game with him.
Yeah.
Square really thought like actually
That's
he's
right.
a bit more of the future I think post-Crisis Core or after.
Crisis Core was
Where he had his
spin-off
own
of FF7.
spin-off, yeah.
I think that in terms of, like those kind of social interactions of the game where you can kind of like befriend people and, and with Final Fantasy, my favorite things is that the way you talk to different people means that you can get dates with you get like a different kind of friendship. You can pick the girls. You end up on a date with either Barrett, Tifa, Yuffie or Aerith.
Oh, you can go on a date with Yuffie as well.
That's hard to do.
You get
I don't know
Yuffie.
how,
You get Yuffie if you're like nice to any of them. If you're awful to all of them, you get Barrett.
Yeah.
I always had Tifa because I have taste. So there you go.
Also, Aerith is with Zach really now. We know that.
Yeah.
we know
I was a
now.
waste of energy at that point. I was like, come on.
Yeah, and she's going to die anyway.
Exactly.
But,
Lovely character. Spoiler alert.
Probably the saddest top 5 saddest deaths.
Just how many games have
It's
a main
number one,
character?
and we did not see
yeah.
that one coming.
Yeah,
it's wild,
yeah,
and like
it's a great
she's
moment.
also really good to level up while she's there. Like she's actually pretty powerful.
And you can get her ultimate. You can get her level 4 limit break if you do things. Go to that island. There's a little house on like a stretch of land near Golden Saucer, and you have to. It's very specific. All this stuff you have to do.
This
I
is the
think.
best part about it. These little challenges, you know what I mean? And like also to put FF7 into context for people who might not know, it actually changed the game. It broke so many records. First Final Fantasy game on the PlayStation, and they did that because they actually were working on it on the Famicom, and then they were working on it on the N64, but the cartridge couldn't handle it. So then they took it to the CD, which is the only thing that could actually handle it. It was huge.
The testament to how good Final Fantasy VII it's so mainstream popular that every edgelord who does like RPG lists never puts it in their top 10 because they're just trying to be cool.
Yeah.
They're trying to be that dick, and you're like, fuck off. Like
it's
you
good.
can like 6 and Chrono Trigger more, and there's a lot of arguments for both.
Yep.
But the amount of them ones where I see where FF7 is like either end of the 10 or not on it, and it's just it's
just
garbage.
wrong.
In terms of that, actually, I agree with those guys. So,
wow.
Seven's like my number one. Number two, sorry, actually, Persona has beaten it. I love
Talk to us about Persona. If we want to talk
Four's
about anime
good too,
crossovers and things that influence each other,
and things that
Persona.
really utilize in terms of like how like side quest social stats, like that is literally a mechanic of how the game works. And so Persona is a series that is actually a spin-off from a game which I'm not that familiar with.
Shin Megami Tensei.
Yep. And I don't know much about that game, to be honest with you. I kind of came into it and I've only played Persona 5. And I played both Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal, which is like another version they made about 2 years later with like new songs and a whole new semester added on, that kind of thing.
Creepy extra stuff.
I'm really, really excited to play because they've announced that they're actually releasing 2 and 3 and 4, I believe, for the Switch for play that because at the moment you can't play them unless you buy them. Like there's not.
4 is on Steam.
Golden,
Yeah.
Golden is, I'm not sure, is 4 on Switch?
No.
Because this was the 25th anniversary, right, this
Yeah.
year. And everyone was like been waiting for news, and they've just announced barely anything from memory. Everyone was like, 6 is going to be announced this year, and like nothing's been heard, right?
Yes. So they are releasing it on Switch and PlayStation, so you're going to be able to play those games, which I'm excited about because I've never played them. What I've heard is that 4 is quite similar to 5.
Yeah, it's very similar, but it's a really good game. I mean, the only problem I had, you could guess, I think it was really obvious who the bad guy was going to be really early, but other than that, it's a really good game.
So the way that Persona 5 works, which I'll kind of focus on, I know that is that you kind of play what I'll describe as like 2 different worlds at the same time. And it's the most anime shit you could like. If you want an anime in a game form, they've actually had successful anime series made out of this. Not so much 5. 4 was a really good anime. 5,
Five's not
terrible,
very liked.
terrible.
It was bad, yeah.
But 5 was a hugely successful game. I think the most successful of the franchise. People were...
Yeah, 5's so big.
And there's so many things to like about it. What I really like about it is that you play in the daytime as a Japanese high school student, and everything that you do in your waking world, which is like, studying, and whether you pick to like go study at the mall, or you can go like hang out with your friends or have a social, like everything you do like reflects what happens when you go into palaces, which at night time you become a phantom thief, which is very much like heist kind of thing. It's turn-based combat. That's really badly explained. But basically it's like you go to this high school, you realize you're like a transfer student. You realize that something's amiss with one of the teachers. This is how the game opens. And you fall into this teacher's mind palace in which you have to then rob it to change his heart and leave a calling card because you have to change his heart within the palace to change the cognitive of the reality.
Obviously.
And of course, very
He's gone
simple.
to the darkness kind of thing.
Yeah. But it's really, really fun because you get the absolute duality of playing like, it's almost like a dating sim. It's almost like playing like
It's such dating sim,
because you
isn't
can
it? I mean, it
romance,
is, yeah.
you can romance people. You can like run, and the way 5 is, you can run around Tokyo. You can like play basketball. You can go do karaoke. You can go hang out with people. And it is so much fun to do that. But then just know that everything you do is not like sort of just like, it's not side quest in a way that's not going to reflect. Like sometimes these games you kind of like something like you literally are building on your fighting stats for when you go into these dungeons and palaces, as they call them. And what I love the most about this game is the best looking game I've ever played. It's so stylish because I love anime. So I know it wouldn't be for everyone. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, it's probably going to be for you. Let's be real.
I would say it's better than a lot of anime because sometimes anime can be very daggy.
Yeah.
But the stylistic choices I think they do in Persona, like, I mean, I love anime, right? But, pretending it's not can be cheesy sometime. When we went to see the early screening of Blue Lock.
Oh, yes.
And then we were watching a weird, sexy video shoot of an anime model of Nami for like a minute and a half and all these interesting shots and like animations in the background. We're just like, yeah, we live in a weird place sometimes. But
Yep.
I think Persona, the stylized choices, I don't know, they're really cool. Because Japanese streetwear and stuff, and a lot of Japanese brands are really cool.
Oh, yeah.
But sometimes anime can feel a bit daggy, but Persona 5 meshes it.
It's
so stylized. I love it. It's so good.
And
Best of both.
the franchise is very famous for its soundtrack as well.
Yes.
And how amazing that is. And there's so many, and also like, because there's similar to Final Fantasy that way where they're like, there's similar structures. I think 4 is very similar, but you have things that you can have multiple personas, and that's kind of the way that the game works is during combat, you can swap personas. In this one, you have a mask that you rip off. In Persona 3, you shoot yourself in the head, and it is a lot, and it's dated terribly.
3 is a weird story.
It's so wild. Like, because in this one, they kind of, to get your persona, you just like, you put a mask on. It's like, persona. And this one, it's like, persona, shoot yourself in the head, and it's like a school kid, and you're like, wow. The best thing about that game is like in terms of storyline. It's really great, characters, development, and you feel like you have a lot of control over it. There's a really great mechanic where you get kind of like, you get day and you get limited time to do things. So you have to pick really wisely like what you're going to do. And I realized that I completed the game without even unlocking a single thing of one of my social confidants, which turned out to be the best one in the game. And I don't want to talk about it.
Okay, yeah.
It was so bad. I can't even.
Still triggered?
I'm upset by this.
Once you level it up, Red's theme plays.
God. I got like to level. I didn't. So have you played?
Yeah, I've been maxed. I have spreadsheets.
Right.
I try and have things where I can, as efficiently possible, max out everything the shortest amount of time.
Yeah, cool.
Wow.
So a lot
Other
of
people have done it
the
as well, though.
Doesn't surprise me.
a lot of the confidants you have to unlock for storyline purposes, but one of them I unlocked one, and then I never unlocked him again, and he was the coffee shop guy.
The foster dad?
Yes.
What?
I don't
He's
know
an
how,
amazing character.
how did I get through that without
Yeah.
that coffee and being able to make that? Because
And he asks you, like, let's have coffee. And you just go, fuck off.
yeah, literally, I was like, I'm busy. Like,
My real dad.
like,
Run up the stairs. Like,
I'm gonna max out this weird politician character that I decided to max out.
Wait, that?
Yeah, I did that.
That's so strange. Because he's
Got it.
kind of hard. You have to go on like Sunday or there's certain days you have to do.
That is a classic me though. I was like, I'm going to do this really obscure thing and then miss one of the main social links.
No, you can't even miss. You've just denied him somehow all the time.
Yeah, honestly, because there's something you have to do. Like it opens up.
you
a
hate
thing,
him?
And then, no, I don't even know. I
So
think
it's more whimsical.
I don't know what happened. Yeah, I think I
Respect that.
kind of.
It would tell me,
didn't
but I
pick up
respect
on
it.
But I got the shoji player, I got the fortune teller, I got all the random ones,
Yep.
and then the main ones which could actually help me in combat. Because if you max them out, if they're on your party, then they give you amazing.
And we talked about just before, sorry to interrupt again, but just like if you max out a character, I can't remember, like, so I'm not gonna, but like you max out the fortune player lady and you just get little bonuses when you fight. And so you get like just all these, so everything just never feels pointless because you're just like, as a person like me, like I didn't really like the fortune teller lady, but you're still got to max her out and get all through all the social stuff because you get to be like, well, I get like plus something or other, you know.
She's
So I
actually
really
the
like
most useful confidant in the game because she can boost anything if you go to her.
that. Right.
So you can go to her and she can go like, I sense your friendship is going to move on quickly, and you get that, and then that you'll go and up a social link.
My whole thing is always doing
Sounds boring.
early on. No, it makes sense. But my whole thing was always early on. You've got to max out the doctor really early, so you can get like.
So you can date her?
discount. No, you get discounts for
that just
items. I can't even remember.
Half
It
you
was
get
just to
half
help.
price on health.
Yeah, I can't. Oh God, I should know because I've done it all the time. But I haven't. It's on another page. I just looked through it.
Yeah.
There's always those old game fact style sort of like playlists where
Yes.
someone's like, "Here's how to perfect it out," and you try and see if you can tweak it and do it better. But you can't.
One thing about this game is that you can date people, which I love, sucker for it. But I mean, it
dating
is
sim.
deeply, it's one of those, Persona's like my problematic favorite, like I'm like, you can date your teacher who's also your maid. Weird, I know. Am I going to do it? Absolutely.
anime.
Am I going to date like 18?
Doctor,
Yeah, I dated the doctor was the hottest. I dated the doctor. Yeah, absolutely. You're a punk hot doctor. I was like, absolutely. This is problematic. I'm probably 15 in this game. I don't know. How old are you? You're a minor for sure. It's not good.
What, second year high school?
It's the actual like romance section isn't explicit though. It's like very PG, but like for some reason, like it's just when you max out certain players and you get a romantic option. And I was like, would be rude to not date 8 people.
I just think with those games, I hate that they punish you for dating everyone because like obviously understand why, but like in those kind of games, you want to experience everything. You don't want to play the game 10 times through the story, and then you're just always like, I can't do the heartbreak scene. I can't do it where I let everyone down.
Anyway, sorry. Persona 5 Royale, I actually think is worth it. Royale's worth the buy because you get a whole extra semester, which is fun. And there's new music and everything like that. So I went to replay it again and I went, I'm going to buy Royale.
And the dance girl's really cool, I think.
Oh, yeah, she's great.
It's a weird storyline, but
yeah,
it's a good storyline.
Yeah, it's cool. If you like anime kind of now-ish, if you're not into super fantasy-based thing, Persona is a game that you will enjoy. It is also just it's addictive. It's so addictive. And me and my housemate were both playing it at the same time in different rooms. So we couldn't it's one you have to kind of play by yourself though. It's not a communal game. You're kind of like.
Yeah. Oh, you remember that one? Oh.
Yeah.
Talk to your teacher.
But I think, yeah, if you just want to go on Spotify and just look at all of this. I mean, I love the Persona 3 soundtrack. Never played the game, but I love that soundtrack.
Well, it's really good. Five's banger. 5 gets me in the mood. Like, especially like some of the fight stuff's really good.
Excellent.
There are some good, like, honestly,
really good
some of the OSTs from these games, like even Suikoden as well, man, that soundtrack is extraordinary.
Don't ask my family about that though.
No, our family mine as well.
Really?
Like, I hate it.
It's like trigger noises.
Triggers for them. Just ask me now.
When I'd leave it on and they'd just be like doing work and just hearing the same tune in the menu going.
Oh yeah, my housemate had to come out and yell at me because of Persona 5, like, you'll never see you come. And I was like, Dad, second. He was like, turn it off. And I was like, no taste.
You got to go full circle. You know when you like hear a song too much, you love it, then you overgo and you sort of hate it. Then you just listen to it nonstop and it comes back around. You're like, oh yeah, I love this again.
Absolutely.
It's hitting again.
It's like, we wanted to talk about this because it was something that we came to this conclusion like during this podcast. We're like, holy shit, like the crossover between JRPGs and anime is massive. And like we got into JRPGs so early. Like I think I was probably 7 when I picked up Shining Force. Like young.
Shining Force 2 is better than 1.
Shining Force 2 is better than 1. Yeah, no, they're both fantastic. But like then I got in Suikoden and Chrono Trigger and FF 7, 8, 9, 10. Like these are formative things in my life. And these games you can play. And I really suggest that you do because they mean a lot to us. And obviously nostalgia is a big part of it. And like Naruto as well, obviously was like at the same time. And
all
these
like
things.
Naruto.
The world building, we love it. Even though Naruto's ending is fucking dog shit, we still love it. You know what I mean?
And also like completely when it gets, sorry, I'm not on an anime podcast, but fuck. Just, the whole like, the Neji thing where he's like, to change your fate. It's like, bitch, actually now we found out you were son of the Hokage. You've got your freaking mum had the most overpowered ability. You got a demon. Like
you're
the most powerful tail gods is like, no, you lied to Neji. Neji was right. He can't change your fate. Like you're a failure. You should be way ahead of where you are right now.
Absolutely.
Everything in your honor. You're like Alexander the Great. Everyone thinks you're amazing, but your dad set it all fucking up for you. Did you inherit the best army in the ancient world? Yes, you did. Yeah.
So Naruto is a nepotism baby.
No?
He's a nepotism baby.
Of course he is.
Yeah,
baby.
it's true.
I had it so hard. I mean, orphan. Yeah, okay, that's fair. But the rest, and he's still looked over by the current Hokage,
Yeah, also, the third has a lot to answer for being really shit.
Yeah.
He's like, what if the whole village hated this one kid?
Yeah, that made no sense.
Like, he's like the nice old
Thank
man.
God for
Like,
the
you're
ramen.
a monster.
Thank God for the ramen.
Thank God the ramen guy is the most underrated. Ichikuro
And the
ramen
teacher.
guy.
The teacher who sort of hated him and quickly was like,
of course.
I'm going to actually be nice to you.
Oh,
yeah.
It's a beautiful moment. I'll return the pain 1,000 times over in that first episode.
Oh, yeah.
The Shadow Clone for the first time.
That's so good. I remember watching that and I literally just got goosebumps.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. But this is the thing.
Yeah.
And this is why we do this podcast. You know what I mean? It's all about us bringing passion to you. And these are things that formed our experiences. And every time I'm, like I said, playing FF7 Remake with you right now is like, it's just this will be a new memory I take forward. And that sounds lame as fuck. But it is beautiful.
But that opening when the train pulls up and you see it in new graphics, like
and when he stands there in front of the tower,
and you're like, and he jumps off the train and he's got and you're like, yes.
I remember to just quickly go back to the Naruto thing. So this was, again, the DVDs at my house, kind of watching it. It was like 4 of us sitting around on my little computer screen. And just I remember when oh God, I forget the names. Who's the androgynous ice person?
Haku and
Zabuza.
and Zabuza.
Yeah, and then when the first time that he's like over and the Demon Fox come out, and we're just losing it. Just kids in a house just running around. Kids.
Episode 17.
It's around there, yeah.
But
just remember just like all of us running around the house. And I think we just started
we were
fighting.
freaking out. We're all of us like, maybe you ready, dude.
Mate, that was maybe when I pushed Joseph down the stairs. Maybe. We got really hyped and they had to come down.
We got real hyped. Actually, one of my favorite stories, and I won't do a full name drop, but if anyone who knows who Nick Albrook is, we went to high school together and played in bands and stuff back in the day. But like Nick also got these VCDs at one point.
Did he?
Yeah. And he still tells this great story. And I ended up watching Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood with him when he came and stayed with me in 2013 after he left Tame Impala and whatnot. Like, again, these formative experiences, which track us throughout our lives. It's really quite special. And Nick always tells the story back in high school when he had the VCDs. It was his turn to have them. And of course, the Rock Lee versus.
I mean, I would have to work to pay for them though. But anyway,
thank you.
I also watched those, so thank you so much.
It was the worst business decision of all. I used to work 15 hours for probably $5 an hour at Red Rooster to buy these CDs, and then with any money left over, I tended to take the boys out before we watched them and buy Red Rooster. Looking back on it, I probably screwed up my high school studies and everything just to do this.
But look at what you did,
Yeah, 15 hours a week to earn $75, spend 40 on it, one CD because I had no other option, and then give you guys some food for 35, some cheesy nuggets for $35.
It was a good time.
Yeah. I think you owe me a drink.
Yeah, I think I might owe you a couple of drinks.
The memories are priceless. Some MasterCard ad. Priceless.
For everything else, this is me going into debt on a MasterCard for chicken nuggets.
But Nick, the famous Rock Lee versus Gaara, and of course he take the weights off, and he stands up and he drops the weights. Everyone's like, lame, dude. They're going to have, then they explode. And you realize it's one of the most hype moments in all anime history.
It
right?
really is.
And Nick Albrook still tells this story where he was standing there with his headphones on a shitty computer back in 2004 or something, and just went like,
Nick Albrook.
Like, literally stood
Wow,
up.
I've never even seen him
then had to like wait, look around, be like, oh shit, is anyone home? Like, and then sit back down and be like, get in there. And like, there's these hype moments. And FF7 again, Aerith's death and these things.
Can I have a quick hot take?
Please.
It was better when AMVs were still around on YouTube, the wild early days,
they were so
where
good.
everyone just made like Evanescence. And,
It was Linkin Park.
Linkin Park. Every Dragon Ball Z hype was to Linkin Park.
Oh,
One thing, I don't know why. And then just
it's the best.
and his hair's going to turn yellow. I know it.
I know it's coming.
Yeah.
So exciting.
God, that was the glory days.
Those are the glory days, man. But anyway, we hope that you can find, if you have played any of these games, I strongly suggest a replay. I actually read an article a little while ago, which they did a psychological study where, like, because gaming, obviously, we were one of the first generations to really properly get into it. I mean, it was before us in the 80s and stuff, but then, games came of age when we came of age, right? And there is actually a psychological benefit to going back and playing the games of your childhood because it takes you back to a time and place where you were at that time, right? And it's like it's a new phenomenon because, again, we're only sort of starting to get the information and the data in on this stuff. So I would strongly suggest, like, every time I go back and play Suikoden, you've said it once on this podcast, so it's like a warm hug, like seeing a good shonen show. It's like like Naruto, anything else. Why we still love Demon Slayer despite all its flaws. I'm like, I still love it, like.
Persona's not a warm hug, but it's
a creepy one.
It's a lit time. It's
great fun.
A lot of fun.
But that's the thing. And like, we hope that you can find some of these games yourselves. And if you haven't, these games still hold up. And get the Suikoden remasters. I promise you. First game's done in 20 hours. It's so fast, so simple.
I would say play 2 first.
I would just do 1 so you can knock it out. It's almost like a prologue to 2. Because they're all some of the same characters.
Hasn't aged as well. And it's not as good a game.
It's more basic. 2 basically just fixed every mistake that 1 had and just made the same game but better.
Start with 2. Because if they don't like 1, they're not going to play 2.
That's true. But yeah, either or. And FF7 obviously still holds up. The remake's fantastic. It's just about to come out.
Same with Final Fantasies, you can play any of them at any point. There's only a couple of sequels. It's like 10-2, which I would recommend playing 10 before 10-2. Or you might not get it.
Live would be like, so it's confusing even after you play 10.
I know, it's deeply. I love that game.
Why are we doing costume changes? Like, shut up.
Don't worry about it.
Mate, dress fears are the best.
Oh my God.
That was the best. There was a magical girl transformation.
Also, I will say it was good because a lot of, not to like simplify things gender-wise, but there was a lot of women I know who really liked that whole aspect. And it was like, oh yeah, it's like, they were actually doing different things and exploring stuff. They could have just played it safe, but they did something really cool and interesting. And a lot of people I know absolutely adored that mechanic. And
that was cool.
It's
not actually like Persona, that mechanic, because you end up with a different stat with your, like, when you change Yuna's outfit, it becomes like a different. You have different things.
I must say the whole like, oh my god, blonde girl, and the whole like early storyline about the creepy coach sexualizing her and like her coming like, oh, don't sexualize me. Then them instantly putting her in like a red latex catsuit is very Japan.
Oh, no. Yeah, Persona is not
Wait,
one
is there no self-awareness here?
Persona is definitely not one that I'd be like, feminist masterpiece. But boys are fun to play. It's my problematic fave.
I really hope, I know some people don't like this, but like, because the main character is always just standard blank protagonist, right? I would love if they could try and actually do guy or girl and make it, you could like romance whoever, like have a bit more depth to that.
Fire Emblem Three Houses does a bit of
it's
that.
actually
Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. You can just do that.
There's
whatever.
a Persona game where you can swap gender. It's Persona 3. But my biggest complaint was that I couldn't romance all of the guys.
Yeah.
I was like, excuse me, sensitive artist. Like I was like,
don't like him. No.
Yusuke? Yeah, absolutely. I would have no. Also, I was like, I was into Akechi. I'm a psycho.
Oh, right. Okay. Wait, really?
I was like, yeah, particularly when he gets gnarly in Royal. I was like, yeah, let's romance him. He's unhinged. Sorry, spoiler.
Spoilers. Well, look, Lockie, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for letting us use your wonderful venue. It's been a wonderful time down in Melbourne.
Wait, I have to say something controversial, surely.
Sure.
I can't think of anything controversial. I do. Azure Dreams, I think, is would be a massive success or like a framework to remake sort of a game that would be huge.
Yes.
You've got anime harem dating simulator. Mm-hmm. You've got all those sort of side elements where you build up a town, like you got building.
A lot of town building, yeah.
Where, and that unlocks more characters and more things happening in the town. And then 3, the tower you go into is like roguelike, where if you die, you can't save in the tower. And if you die, you lose all the stuff you took in with you. And you have monsters like Pokemon. It's literally all the most popular elements in the world in one game that worked, but it was so niche and a little weird that I think a lot of people never would have tried it. But if you remade that, all those elements, you just,
You're right. It's one of those, again,
we could put a weirdo guy in there for you.
Thank God. I
like to wear the monster skin. Charles like,
can I romance him? My friend playing Stardew Valley and romance the town like alcoholic.
Oh, Shane.
Shane's
weirdly popular amongst the fans.
Really?
Weirdly popular, man.
That's just something about people.
And stuff. Yeah, of course.
I can change. I can fix it.
Literally, that's what she said. She was like, I can fix Shane.
Oh, no.
And I went, I would also do that.
It's a nice storyline. Stardew Valley is another great example of how these things can work. That's JRPG inspired, surely.
Well, Harvest Moon.
Oh God, I loved Harvest Moon. That was more my OCD-ness of arranging things.
I love Stardew Valley as well. We played it a lot of times together.
I used to emulate Harvest Moon.
Great game.
God, now I'm just going down. See, we need more time. We haven't even talked about like Xenoblade or Xenosaga.
We talked about
you could do a whole podcast.
Everyone's favorite JRPG.
You could do a whole podcast on this. You know what I mean? Just purely.
It's probably not. Is there enough new ones? It feels like it's very light novel dominated these days.
Yeah, but it's still massive, and it's only getting bigger. And again,
Star Ocean, you've got so many JRPGs.
There's Star Ocean till the end of time.
Limley.
So many. But Ark the Lad. Remember that? It was a strategy.
That was a great game.
Good game too.
I forgot about that.
For hours.
There's so many.
We've played a lot of games. Most of my life.
Vanguard Bandits.
Holy shit. Look, we could do this forever. But thank you for having us.
Lagoon. Sorry.
Yep. Legend of Legaia. Legend of Dragoon.
Yeah, wow.
There's a lot of them out there.
No, that's a game that should be remade.
That's true, actually. Reza got that one.
I think that's universally loved. It's an amazing RPG that just, for whatever reason, never made it.
Wow, Dragoon.
Legend of Dragoon?
Yeah, really underrated. But there's so many. Again, the JRPG subreddit's actually a nice place. A lot of people just being like, hey, I remember that game. Yeah, that game's sick.
Right.
Of course, a lot of people being like,
you did literally go, it's really wholesome, and then told us about
the controversy. Look, it's still Reddit.
The bar's just that low.
For Reddit,
there were no slurs. Oh, okay, that's pretty awesome.
Good.
A couple. Anyway, look, thank you so much for having us. It's been so nice to be down in Melbourne. Crunchyroll Expo was a very interesting experience. We had a lot of fun.
Sweet. Interesting is
we'll see.
Unfortunate things, but
we'll see how that plays out. It's been fun to be down here, and let's go play FF7 Remake some more before I head back.
That's why you're trying to wrap up the podcast.
That's it. I need to just do another side quest. Get home.
The side quests are a bit.
Too many side quests. That's the one criticism. But anyway, thank you all so much. We'll catch you next time. We'll be back in Sydney and back to the studio, but it's been fun to change it up.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks again. Cheers. GG Easy. Come check it out if you're in Melbourne.
Oh, yeah. I'm supposed to do that, aren't I?
Yeah, do a plug.